Welcome to the Jobs and Work podcast. If you're like most Americans, you spend a significant amount of your time working. In fact, we spend more time at our jobs than anywhere else. But how often do we really talk about work in America? On this podcast, the Work for Change team will. Work for Change, LLC is a team of social scientists, thought leaders, and digital storytellers who dig into the critical issues affecting American workers and workplaces today. Our podcast is co-hosted by Dr. Kendra Jason and myself, Dr. Chris Maycumber. We'll also bring guests onto the show who reflect the diversity of the American workforce. We are so excited for you to join us as we lead the efforts to humanize the workplace by building dignity and equity into jobs, work, and organizations. Please subscribe to the podcast and share us with your friends and family. You can learn more about Work for Change at workforchangellc.com. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Jobs and Work podcast. This is episode number 15, and I am your co-host, Chris Maycumber.
And I'm co-host Kendra Jason.
And we are really happy today. We have a special guest. Dayna Perillo is here to talk about her career in retail. Thank you, Dayna, for joining us on the show today.
Thank you. Good morning. I appreciate you both having me here today.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. So Dayna is a native New Englander who graduated from Providence College with a degree in English. And what started as a part-time retail job during college unexpectedly took shape into a very successful career path. Today, she is a servant leader with over 20 years experience, remotely leading large, diverse teams in retail, specifically in the fashion and athletic industries. So we have a lot to talk about today, Dayna, as it relates to your decades of experience and work. But we wanted to get started with the question of how did you end up launching this very successful career in retail with what started as a part-time college job?
Yeah, I just fell into it, to be transparent. I went to Providence College, and I had all intentions when I had started college on having a career in education. I'd been told my entire life you should be a teacher, and that's what I went to pursue. And halfway through college, I started to think about other options and other opportunities. And when I graduated, I was actually pursuing, employment in the public relations field. That's what I was looking for. That's kind of what I focused in on my senior year. But the one steady that I had throughout college was a same part-time job that I had worked for 4 years and just become accustomed to. And somehow I fell in love with retail. And I think something that's really, relative and has always existed in our industry is the stigma that, people don't go to college to work in retail. And you know what, you can find yourself a very successful career in retail without going to college. But, I think I had that in my head at the time and didn't necessarily see it as a job. And I had a leader and a mentor at work, that asked me to consider it as an opportunity. And, I took it. They enrolled me in a management training program, and I fell in love with retail. I had the opportunity to manage a multi-million-dollar business with literally zero experience straight out of college, and kind of got bit by the retail bug. But I think the thing that made me stay is without a business degree, I had the opportunity to learn a business, but I also still got to lead a team, and I was teaching people every day. So I don't know what I thought it was going to lead into. I started as a part-time sales associate. I worked in the stock room, and then a few years out of college, I was running my own store. I was promoted to be a district manager, I think by the time I was 24 years old, and found a successful career, a corporate career in retail from there. So I've been very blessed.
That's awesome.
So Dayna, like retail gets a bad rap a lot of time, especially how we see it in on television and social media. And, you said that, you got bit by the bug, you fell in love with it. So what was it about retail for you that you grew this strong affinity for it along the way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a couple of things for me. I think, the academic part of me really fell in love with the business and having the opportunity to run my own business and treat it as if it was mine. If every dollar that went to that register went into my pocket to feed my family, what would that experience feel like? I think the idea of team, I grew up, Chris can tell you, I grew up playing sports. So just the idea of being a team and being a part of a team. And I
Mm-hmm.
think truly when you think about retail and where it gets a bad rap, but something that I love is just connecting with consumers.
Yeah.
I especially as I've grown in my career and the types of retailers I've worked for is, really understanding the product and the brand that it is that you're working for, having it be a part of your lifestyle and being able to connect that to a consumer and help them in some way, shape, or form.
Thank you. So you use the term servant leader to describe your position. Can you tell us more about that role and how it fits in the industry of retail?
Yeah, I think, and I know we'll probably get into it, but retail's evolved a lot. And I would say the person that I was, 15, 20 years ago getting into the industry and the person I am today has grown quite a bit. And I think part of that is just innately as you see the generation shift. But I wholeheartedly believe in a servant leadership philosophy. I truly believe that people work for people, and I think you get the best results from your teams when you
Mm-hmm.
invest in serve them. I think it's the whole concept. People talk a lot about manager versus leader.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, manager, that title sometimes has a stigma to, wanting authority and, I'm the boss and I'm always right. And these are my decisions. And, at the end of the day, I believe if you hire really smart, intelligent people, get out of their way, give them the
Mm-hmm.
tools they need, give them the support, give them the framework and kind of be there as a sounding board. But, I think when I think about servant leadership and some of the things that resonate with me and that I've worked on over my career are really just active listening, listening to actually hear people and not listening to respond, having that level of self-awareness and, really valuing diverse perspectives and understanding. I think sometimes people in larger teams get stuck in this group think where, you want to hire people that are just like you because you think it's going to be easy and you think you can move
Mm-hmm.
quicker
Mm-hmm.
and not really realizing that the best teams are the ones that come to the table with diverse perspectives. So for me, protecting and taking care of and serving my team is kind of my top priority. And, I've said this at every retailer I've gone to, but it's interesting when you mix retail and corporate too. I think sometimes people forget I would not have a job and I would not have a paycheck if it wasn't for the person that is standing in that store at that register at that point of sale. Like I
Yeah.
work for stores. It's not the other way around. And I think as people continue to grow in their careers and they get higher titles, they think people work for them. And that's not really true, you know?
Mhm. And it sounds like what you're able to do and what makes you such a great leader. And you don't have to dig far to find people who just rave about working with you. I mean, your teams love you. People say that she's like the best leader they've ever had, and working for her is like the ultimate experience. But it sounds like what you're able to do, Dayna, is see how everything fits together. Like you have a really sort of comprehensive analysis of everyone's role and how integrated everyone's role is. And if my memory is right, you have a background in sociology. Weren't you a sociology minor in college too?
That I was, yes, for a very
Yeah.
small, yeah.
Yeah, so it seems like your skill set, that what you said in the very beginning is someone saw something in you. Somebody said you would be good for this track. So you had like this set of skills that maybe, wasn't necessarily what you went to college for, but I think that's what's fascinating about the workplace is somebody, a mentor,
Mm-hmm.
sees something in you, sees a skill set and says, wow, she'd be really great. So I think that also is a testament to relationships and how important those are in the workplace and how those can lead to opening up doors. Something we had asked, we like to ask our guests, what is a topic that they would like to talk about? And one of the things you mentioned that you would like to kind of dig into is leading with empathy and prioritizing and or creating space for one's mental health. So can you talk a little bit more about what that has been like, either during COVID or pre-COVID for you?
Yeah, I think that's something that over the years I've really worked on. Active listening. I've kind of taken as a personal goal for me and a professional goal for me. Uh, but I think it's just become more and more true when I think about the last 2 years and everything that's kind of transpired from just before the pandemic to
Mm-hmm.
through the pandemic, especially for retail. And there used to be topics, at least from our generation, that I think were taboo at work. People wouldn't talk about politics. People wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
talk about race. People wouldn't talk about religion or sex, and none of those things had place in the workplace. And I think, if those conversations had probably come up 15, 20 years ago, someone would be calling human resources saying, hey,
Mm-hmm.
this is not your
Mm-hmm.
place to have that conversation. And,
Mm-hmm.
I think about my own personal experience. I live alone in a one bedroom apartment in New York City, and that could be pretty isolating, to be by yourself for that many months and, not be able to go outside. Everything was closed in New York. So I
Mm-hmm.
think about what my personal experience was like. And, I currently today have a team of around 60 plus stores. And when you think about the number of people that work in a retail fleet, could be upwards of 1,000 people. And all of those individuals are going through different experiences, and especially for our leaders in stores. They're used to being on their feet in four walls connecting with consumers, and we closed for 8 months. So
Mm-hmm.
now they're
Mm-hmm.
learning to work virtually. Some of them are parents, some of them are single parents, and they're having to homeschool and teach their children virtual school at the same time as they're trying to keep their teams engaged. And on top of that, you think about all the racial and social injustice that we've seen over the last, it's become at least a little bit more prevalent over the last
Mm-hmm.
year through media. You think about COVID. I've had, team members that have suffered from COVID. I've had team members that have lost parents,
Mm-hmm.
loved ones to COVID. I've had people that have struggled with depression and have been really vocal about it. So I think for me, too, I think it's just as we get back into work, it's the concept of seeking to understand and not making assumptions. I think in retail, you're not 5 minutes early, you're 5 minutes late. So if someone's late for their shift, I'm going to write you up. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
really? Well, why don't we stop and ask that person, why were you 5 minutes late today? Oh, well, I'm trying to transition to, I'm a single parent with 2 kids, and I was trying to get my kid on a Zoom. You know what I mean? I think rather than just jumping to conclusions, really seeking to understand and listening to people is more important now than ever. And we've done things, at least I've done things in my career in the last year that I've never done before. I've had all 60 plus of my managers on a call just to have listening sessions,
Mm-hmm.
in the wake of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and everything in between, just to hear how people are feeling. And yeah, it may not have anything to do with some store's particular business, but for some people, they spend more time at work than they do with their families.
Yeah.
So this is a place, and sometimes some people have done really well in the pandemic, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm an introvert, I want to be at home, I thrive here. And then we have other people, I work, my territory spans all across DC, New York City, Boston. I've got Ohio, Michigan, Kentucky. For some people, home isn't a safe space, so work is their
Right.
safe space and work is their escape. So you never know where people are coming from. And that's the one thing I tell my teams all the time. If you walk into a building and you take the time to be there, look in everyone's eyes, say hello, have a conversation. Like you never know what that means to somebody, in that moment.
Yeah. One thing that Chris and I really promote with Work for Change, the business, is that centering humanism, centering dignity, and the way that I hear from you is just, it's like empathy as well. It's like, I love how you're describing how the retail industry is evolving, where things that were taboo are now just like, hey, this is a whole person. They don't just work for us. They have a family. They have to manage their mental health. They have to manage their physical health. They may have other caregiving responsibilities. And it's not just about the clocking in and clocking out. And so I know this is a philosophy that you hold on to in your position, but do you feel that this is a philosophy that's being echoed across the industry? Or is it something that is, just burgeoning from the consequences, if you will, of COVID-19 and the racial uprisings and all the other calls for social justice and really just social humanism over the last year or so?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. And honestly, I think the answer is it's split. I can
Mm-hmm.
say I'm really fortunate in my career to work for companies that prioritize people. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying all of them have, but I would say most of them have. And to me, that's kind of where I gravitate and where I want to plant roots is companies that are people centric. I've also seen the other end of the spectrum where, there's a little bit more of a hierarchy and we want to
Mm-hmm.
focus on checklists and things like that. But I do think, to your point, I think it is evolving and shaping, as a
Mm-hmm.
product of not even just what's happened in the last 2 years, but you just think about the generations. Like Gen
Right.
Z is so much different than,
Mm-hmm.
than I was growing up. And, you know, and this generation is born with a device in their hand. They're digitally native. They need different things. We think about what they seek, in sustainability and corporate responsibility. So I think innately we continue to shift. And I mean, that is true of retail too, right? The retailers that will not adapt and shift to what our teams need and what the consumer needs and meet people where they want to be met today are the retailers that are closing their doors. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's pretty split, but I will say I'm very fortunate, especially currently.
Right. So something you mentioned, Dayna, is your geographic region is pretty large. I mean, I heard Kentucky, I heard Boston. I mean, you have a pretty big area, and the
Mhm.
majority of your work is remote. So how, as someone who's very people person, likes to look you in the eye, how do you manage being a leader and having to do that virtually?
Yeah, it's an interesting one for me too, right? Because um, geographically, for me personally, we went through a corporate realignment in February of 2020.
Mm,
So I
okay.
went to a conference, picked up an entire new region. So I picked up the Great Lakes region, Michigan, Kentucky, Ohio, about 2.5 weeks before we shut down for COVID. So I still have a leader, and I was fairly new to my organization. So I still have a leader that I've actually never physically traveled with or been in their stores for the entirety of the time that we worked together. And
Wow.
then I also have multiple leaders that work for me within the same city that I get to see weekly.
Mm,
So it's a balance for me. I fill my cup, I guess, so to speak, that way
mhm,
by getting into stores in New York City where I live, New Jersey, Long Island. But I think for the stores that I can't reach, I mean, we rely on technology. We do, weekly virtual visits with teams. Try to do it on their time and their schedule before the stores open, so they're not trying to multitask too much because on top of everything that we're talking about now, they still have to manage COVID restrictions. So like
Yeah.
work for them too is also a completely different ball game,
Mm-hmm.
than it was years ago. So connecting with people virtually. So whether that's formally trying to do a virtual visit, so we could simulate what we would do if I was to travel and visit there. I've done so many coffee chats, just getting to know leaders that I've never met before and having an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity for exposure, not to necessarily talk about work. Um,
mm,
We've had happy hours. We've done, some happy hours so people can, let their guard down and get to know one another and, try to keep open office hours just if
Mm-hmm.
people want to connect or, want to bounce things off of you. But it's weird. It's been challenging to try to build relationships that way. But I also feel like maybe the relationships have accelerated because you felt the need to kind of force
mm.
and do that because you can't be together in person.
Yeah, there is a more intentional cultivation that has to happen, I think, when you're setting aside time, right, on Zoom to talk to someone. But yeah, I mean, it seems like there's been a lot of changes because of COVID. What do you foresee looking forward with retail? I mean, I'm thinking about online shopping and malls closing and all of the other sort of economic shifts that have impacted retail. So, what kind of conversations do you all have about what things might look like in the future?
Yeah. I think everyone's hopeful that come 2020, we'll start to see a shift or at least normalize a little bit. But, I think the conversation around ecom has been relative far before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone would say brick and mortar was a dying breed. And not only just an uptick in ecom, but when you think about like the uptick in people just like shopping on their cell phones, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
before you think of online shopping, you think of somebody on their desktop or on their laptop buying things. But the amount of people that are purchasing off of apps and from their cell phones today continue to grow as well. And then you put retailers like Amazon and Target, and you have overnight and same day ship and same day pickup in the game. And it
Mm-hmm.
forces people to evolve and change. And like I was saying earlier, just about our teams and the generation, we need to meet the consumers where they want to be met. And some of that is going to be integrating technology into stores. Do people have the ability to look at our inventory and do a same day pickup, do a
Mm,
curbside pickup? We can put it in their trunk when they come in.
mm,
um, you know, there's still going to be, and I think it's even true, even though Gen Z is so digitally native, they're probably one of the generations that are most open to wanting to come in and interact with a brand. touch a product, to feel a product, to understand the technology, and they're not. I think when we grew up, we were extremely brand loyal. Like, I shop here, I wear this is what I do. They're willing to test out different companies based on what they see. So
Interesting.
continue to evolve and to be able to meet those individuals. But I do think for us, integrating technology, whether it is same day in-store pickup, we do, ship from store and send things out from store. But, we will continue to see people that want to come in and interact with the brand. And it's our responsibility to be a pinnacle expression of the brand and to have, the right level of consumer experience. And that all comes back to your team. You can build a beautiful store, you can build all the technology you want, but if you don't have people that are bought into the brand, that believe in the product, and that truly want to serve the consumer, I think that's where we fail. And right now, it's a scary climate. As people are collecting stimulus and unemployment. I mean, there are so many pockets of the country where, staffing is tough. And when staffing gets tough, what do? People get nervous and maybe want to make desperation hires, and just start hiring anybody who applies versus, really sitting down and connecting with people. So yeah, it's an interesting question, but I do think that we'll see more technology integrated. You see brands doing it now, coming up with experiential shops, pop-up shops, testing things. But you have to be resilient and be able to kind of continue to iterate, or I think you get left in the dust.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked a little bit about racial justice and some of the other social issues. Do you feel like retail is leading some of that work, or do you, like you said, you make a point to have calls to check in with your staff, your team? Is there like an intentional formalized process where companies are saying we'll have trainings, we're going to hire people to come in and do trainings, or is it sort of left up to people like you to either make that work important or not? Like, is there a formal move happening?
Yeah, I think it's a mix, right? I have a lot of friends in the industry, and I will say some companies are doing it extremely well. Some companies are trying to figure it out, and some companies still are probably afraid to start broaching these topics in the workplace. I think from personal experience, I think some of the things that I've seen that have worked well are just even ahead of everything we've experienced in the last year is just proactive diversity and inclusion training. That existed before, well before I was hired here, and it's continued on, it's accelerated. I think, bringing in, outside consultancy and continuing to evolve what that needs to look like, and building that culture of awareness in stores. A lot of organizations, something that I've seen start to evolve a lot is just employee resource groups. They're referred to as ERGs, but, I think really letting and kind of giving the employee the opportunity to impact and make those changes for the organization. There's been at least here, for people to have a voice and to have a platform and actually to have some decision making and power, I think has been really good. And it's empowering because it's driven by them. No one's telling them what they can and can't or should or shouldn't be doing. So I think those are probably the two biggest impactful things that I've seen. And then I think depending on what companies want to make in terms of public statements around their stances, whether that's, who they're partnering and allying with, where they're investing their money, into what communities, what charities, what sponsorships, what partnerships.
So what's next for you, Dayna, in terms of your career? Do you see yourself spending more time in retail? Are you getting antsy to do something else? I mean, it sounds like it's a dynamic field for you because you do get to teach. You are teaching. I can tell from what you've talked about. People learn from you. Your team learns about what a good leader is and learns how to lead with integrity and dignity and centering people. So I can see how things change a lot. But do you ever think about something else you would do if you weren't in retail? Like, if I wasn't a leader in this industry, I would like to do this.
It's a great question. Honestly, I can't picture myself doing anything else. If you would have asked childhood me, we'd probably be making movies or in a rock band. But no, I mean, I don't know. I fell into something that I love. And to me, it does. It comes back to people. What I will say is it's all relative, right? There are incredible people out there in every industry, and I do believe
Yeah.
leadership skills are transferable. And I try to preach that all the time. I think sometimes taking somebody from outside of retail and getting a different perspective into certain roles too, I think is wildly successful. So I'll never say never for the future, but
Yeah.
I literally get up and go to work every day excited about my team and
Mhm.
watching them be successful and watching them be able to work through things. So happy and content. So I would say
Good.
for the long run, you'll see me sitting here.
Great. That's awesome. Oh, you're on mute.
Dayna, I wanted to ask you, and you spoke about this a little bit about, you didn't frame it in this way, but I frame it in, being a good manager, right? Or being a good leader. I think that would be a better term. What advice would you have for others who are in leadership roles, who have teams, who have employees, and they're looking for ways to connect or to, do their jobs better through how they relate to their team? What advice would you have for them?
I think it's always, to me, I think the first step is that initial conversation, right?
Okay.
Before you're jumping into business, and especially in this day and age, right? You said it, talking earlier just about your family and maybe needing to get a pause. Like, we've moved away from people having to apologize for things like that, right? I'm on
Mhm.
calls, kids are running in the background, popping up in the frame. Like, you get to know people's kids, and you talk about humanizing, but it's so humanizing to see someone that maybe you've only seen sit in a conference room, have to be mom or dad for a
Yeah,
minute,
yeah,
to do things, or having to apologize for leaving work early because you need to go take your kid to practice or pick your kid up from somewhere. So, I think getting to know someone's core values, who they are in and outside of work, what's important to them. Something I always ask people when I interview people or if I take over a team is, how do you like to be led? Tell me what motivates you, how do you want to be managed? How do you want to be communicated to? I listen, then I like to share, what's important to me. And then I think as you start working, you find that common ground. But I always like to use the analogy. It's like straightening deck chairs on the Titanic, like, I think you don't have the right team and you don't set the right foundation, you just keep doing the same things over and over and over again with the same result. So
yeah.
I think getting buy-in and building your team culture and making them a part of the journey. It's not about what I want to do. It's what do we want to do? What do we want to stand for? What do we want to be known for? What's our goal? And then really clearly defining roles for people. Fine, I have a title, but like, what is your role in this project? Where do you need my support and where do you need me to lean in, and making that really clear for people, so people don't have question marks.
Yeah. Wow. What a great philosophy you have and a great approach. And, it's clear now why people love working with you. Has anyone ever asked you to write about your leadership style, or did you get training in this? Is this like the way you've been sort of mentored, or did you kind of develop your own philosophy and style?
Definitely not. Definitely not. I don't know writing anything anytime soon. But I mean, I was really fortunate at a young age stepping into a leadership role to get a lot of, situational leadership training and, a lot of behavioral leadership training. And I've gone through a lot of D&I coursework, over the course of my career. So, I think part of it is I've had access to, some great leadership programs. And then I think part of it is just kind of learning on the fly,
Yeah.
what has been impactful for me.
Mhm.
I've also learned from experiences what has not been impactful for me. I can't say every leader that I've had has been a great one, but from that, what do I take? What do I take from that, and how do I become better for the next person that I lead or the next person that I manage? And I think, to me, honestly, the two key things that stick with me right now are the ability to listen, the ability to empathize, and build that relationship, because it pays you back tenfold, and it's a two-way street. It's not just for me, it's for them too.
Right. Well, thank you for spending your time with us and sharing your experiences and your expertise. It's been really great to learn from you. Thanks, Dayna.
Thank you. This has been awesome. Great start to the day.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And if For our listeners, if you are an organizational leader or an employee who wants to have a better work experience, one that's centered in dignity, centered in humanism and equity, and even transformation, reach out to Work for Change. That is the consulting company, just like Dayna was talking about. We have, we can be the external eyes and ears to help you get to the place that you would like to get to. So please, you can find us at work4changellc.com. You can find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and of course, you found us here on YouTube. So please like, subscribe, and share so that we can work to make the world of work better.